Welcome to our next panel. This conversation we're about to have is about MSIs, Master Systems Integrators. For those of you who are maybe new to that concept, give you a little background on it. Before I do, my name's Scott Cochrane. I'm with Cochrane Supply and Engineering. We're a distributor based out of Detroit, and we've been working with control products for over 50 years. And with that, we've been fortunate to work with great contractors throughout the United States and Canada. And what we've seen is many of them have changed their business model recently, or in the last, say, 5-10 years. And what's going on is that what the Master Systems Integrators become is essentially the purveyor of the data in the building. Right? So contractors, BAS contractors, typically have put in BAS systems. And as the owners, and well, frankly, this started when LawnWorks came out. Anybody remember LawnWorks, 90s? The concept, so that was when we first realized that we could take products from different manufacturers and get them to work together, okay, with software. And as we started to do that, we learned that we could integrate lighting, HVAC, we could integrate Train with Carrier, and integration became real. And this was probably in the 2000s. There was this little company called Tridium that came along, and the Niagara framework was one of the key enablers that allowed integrators to convert and tie these systems together in a building, and thus they created new services for the building owners and the occupants with the combined data and these new capabilities, and thus the Master Systems Integrator was born. Now, these contractors at first were, I will say, unique and special. Most of them had pretty extreme IT capabilities and were writing their own software and things like that, but the tools have advanced. And now, Master Systems Integrators come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. And that's what we're gonna talk about today, is not just the traditional mechanical Master Systems Integrator, but who else is doing Master Systems Integration? How are they doing it? And how is this industry gonna continue to evolve as more and more building owners are getting frustrated with the disparate silos of data in their buildings, right? So this opportunity continues to grow, and so we're gonna try and study all aspects of it here with this great panel we put together. And I even planted some people in the audience to further the conversation. And there's some of you I see that I know that I may bring into the conversation. So this should be real, and we're open to talk about different topics here. So let's get into it. So first, I'd like to introduce my panel. And I'll start with, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But the first one I'd like to introduce here is somebody I've worked with for over 30 years with Niagara. He's I guess the OG of Tridium Vicon now, and he's probably worked with more Master Systems Integrators than anybody in the country. His name is Ed Merwin. Say hello, Ed.
Thank you, yeah. I don't know if the mic's working. Yeah, so Ed Merwin with Tridium, 25 years at Honeywell, introduced Niagara into Honeywell, and then went over to Tridium, and have been there ever since, focusing mostly on the channels and system integration channels my whole career. So very happy to be here today and open to any questions you have regardless.
Thanks, Ed. And sitting next to Ed is so funny. We had a contractor whom was supposed to be in our panel who unfortunately couldn't make it. So the individual next to Ed, this is Dan Bonfiglio with Michigan Environmental Controls in Michigan. And Dan just decided, he agreed to be on the panel this morning when I texted him and said, hey dude, I need a contractor on the panel. Could you help me out? And Dan's been nice enough to sit in. So Dan, could you introduce yourself real quick?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, Dan Bonfiglio with Michigan Environmental Controls. Been in the contracting world since, I believe, 99 is when we started Michigan Environmental, and kind of started down in the trenches and mostly plan and spec work, and really worked to transform our business the last 10 years to the end user services within our customer base.
Thanks, Dan. And then next to Dan is Erin Defrieze. Now, Erin and I met when Erin was working for LinkSpring a little while ago, and Erin's career is really interesting, but she's been in this part of the industry for quite a while now. And now she's got a very interesting role working for Stantec. And we're going to learn more about how they use MSI as a service. Erin, could you introduce yourself a little?
I am Erin Defrieze. I started in '98.
Whoa.
So I actually go back to the open interoperable buzzwords of LAN and BACnet. To Scott's point, I was a contractor for 18 years, sitting on the bucket, programming, installing an integrator myself. I spent about 5 years with LinkSpring as the professional services manager, and I've moved into the consulting engineer role for the last 3 years.
Yep, cool. Thanks, Erin. Okay, and then finally at the end, we got the guy with the name tag. He's got his own name tag, so you all know his name. This is Nate Kerr. Nate used to work for Ed at Tridium, I think, way back in the day. So Nate learned from the great ones, but Nate's journey's taken him into a really interesting place. He's working for Wesco, which is the huge electrical distribution business, and Wesco's got a plan to be an MSI. And I want to introduce Nate. Nate, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nate Kerr. Like Scott said, started my journey about 15 years ago working for KMC Controls, and then, as Scott mentioned, was fortunate enough to spend about 6 years at Tridium, working really closely with Ed and Scott there. I left Tridium to go to CBRE ESI, which is the now called Smart FM Solutions. That's the MSI division of CBRE. And then from there, I made my way to Wesco, where I now lead sales for the EntroSim platform and services team. So we're providing a combination of technology and services.
Cool, thanks. So we're going to dive into that too. All right, so let's get into this. So to start the conversation, I'd actually like to start with Dan. And Dan, your clients, you don't really talk about MSI with them, but you perform those services. So could you explain to everybody kind of like your approach to your clients when it comes to integration and those extra services, and how you guys look at that as an extension to your business, or even how it's changed over the last couple of years?
I mean, it's for us. I mean, I'm going to be honest. It's been only the last 10 years we've really focused on those end user services, but we found it very beneficial to our core business. Getting into those customer bases. I mean, doing connected services with all different types of pieces of equipment inside the building, but it's really boosted our business. We were the guys at the plan and spec market. There was our competitors were making business off our customer base, and we've kind of transformed that, like I said, over the last 10 years, just getting in there and developing those relationships, helping, I mean, really those services we get in there with energy optimization, and that just leads into fault detection and all the other software as a service type systems. So
yeah, and Dan, when you came into you took over a company that had been around for a while doing plan and spec with a single product line. They were like representing a product line in the plan and spec market. And then when you came in, can you speak to how a multi-vendor approach to integration is important, like how that changed the business for you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, it would change the business because when the economy was going up and down, specifically in our market, we had other services to offer. I mean, just plain and simple. And our customers in those tight times, I mean, we really relied on them, and they, came through for us on all different avenues of those services.
Yep. All right, cool. So I'm going to pass it over to Ed now. Okay, Ed. So Ed, I mean, with all the experience we've had working with all the different integrators, can you talk about some of the common traits of these MSIs? Like, what are some of the common attributes that these companies have, like Dan's, that separate them from maybe the traditional BAS contractors?
Well, I'm going to start years ago. The first time I heard the term Master Systems Integrator, it had to do with a college campus where they had 5 or 6 building automation or controls contractors, and they really wanted to have one person looking over that and have more of a universal service provider who would offer consistency, right? So at that time there was a select few group of people that could be that MSI, but there were plenty of people that could do 15900 in those days and could do the controls, do a really good job, but they weren't willing to take the risk. So the first MSIs. And now we use the term integrator, should probably be master system services. It should be a better term in a way. But the point is, those were people that were willing to take a little bit of risk and transform their business, right? And that took some guts to do. The people that had a good service base could take a little bit more risk because they could experiment with some of their customer base. But all of them had this idea and had a vision, okay? Could have been, I saw some people that you never thought would have that kind of vision, but they said, you know what, I got to think about 10 years ahead of that. So I think that's the most important trait. They said, I think I can do this. And they also said, I want to keep my customers forever. And I worked for Honeywell for years, and that was, customer base is big. If you work for the big Honeywell, Johnson, or Siemens, you focused on your customer base. So I think that's another trait.
Agreed.
And I used to term they had a big Rolodex, and I mentioned that word Rolodex, and some of the younger people at Tridium said, "What's a Rolodex?" Well, that's a spinning. Us old people used to keep our cards, our business cards, in a Rolodex. But that point was, it was to build the base. So I think one, they had this ability, regardless of their age, to take a little bit of risk, to hire people that probably knew more than they did about technology. And really wanted to focus on the customer. So if I had to give you 3, that would be it.
Oh, that's great, Ed. Yeah, Dan, do you want to add something?
So basically, that's hitting the nail on the head. We took a tremendous risk by hiring guys that know way more about technology than myself. We were the guy just, looking at prints and putting things together. I had to go outside of that, my comfort zone, big time. There were some sleepless nights, but it paid off big time.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I've seen with over time, as we mentioned, this is not new. This is a couple, 10, 20 years in the making. But what we've seen is essentially the owners now are really gravitating more towards the MSI as the primary person to supply the BAS, even though they may not even do the BAS work. The MSI, because they're the one feeding the data, they're the one feeding the applications back to the owner in a usable form, they are the closest to the owner relationship, anybody in the scale. We've seen MSIs get pulled out and put as primes on projects. We've seen them be put on 10 projects at once. Why? Because it's not like a contractor per se. It's more of like Ed said, it's a service provider. And so a lot of times the MSI's relationship with the end user is not project-based, it's portfolio-based. Because end users want commonality with their data, with their system. So the MSIs also have the advantage of being brought from job to job to job, because of the skills and the services that they're able to bring the end user at the end of it. So, but we've seen it in the mechanical industry for years, and it's grown like crazy. I dare to say that some of the largest projects in the country, especially these data center projects, they're being won by independent contractors that have integration capabilities. There was, when I came into the business as a young lad, and I can say this because I don't work for any of the big guys, but in the original days when I came in, every big project went to one of the big companies, and there was no discussion of independents even being involved. Guys, I'll just say it. The largest project in Detroit this year, it's a $300 million controls job, which one of the big manufacturers got, is being managed by a systems integrator in Detroit. And his company is going to integrate not just the HVAC, but the lighting and a bunch of stuff for that hospital project in Detroit. And so even though the big contracts are still going to the big companies in a lot of cases, there are layers now for these services that can rest above it, around it, all sorts of different places. So it's a very dynamic business for the mechanical industry, and it's been so fun to watch everybody grow up in it, and then to watch the success today, Ed, of some of our longtime customers, and watching Dan change his company. It's just been fun. All right, so let's broaden the perspective on this conversation. So now I want to introduce Erin again. And Erin, could you tell everybody about Stantec and what Stantec does and what you're trying to accomplish?
So within Stantec, right now, we're the largest architectural and engineering firm in the world. That just came out for 2025. We are the only automation group. There are 22 of us that we strictly specialize in building automation systems, integrations, things of that nature. That is our sole focus. We have half our team that does PLCs and focuses on data center. And then there's my team that plays in the commercial space. We do data centers, but we stay with the DDCs. So Tridium, things of that nature. We also partner with a lot of MSIs. Matter of fact, one of my regular partners is sitting in the room right now. We partner with them for a lot of our large international and national clients because it's the MSIs that we work with that help us develop documents such as Guideline 25s that go along with a Division 25. It also helps us develop OPRs. And this actually helps represent owners' desires, not the end contracts, but the desires that they hand out then to the engineering firms or to MSIs or contractors, and it sets the playing field. It sets naming structures, folder structures. What are your graphics going to look like? What are the requirements of bringing in EPMS equipment, lighting? What protocols can we work on? What are our IP challenges? What can we do within our IT world? What do those things look like? So to be able to partner with MSIs, it helps us as consulting engineers also better serve our own clients.
And Erin, with those partnerships, the MSIs, I mean, your company though, doesn't the end user kind of look at you guys as the MSI of MSIs then, because you're essentially managing that process for them as an engineer to get them their expected outcome?
Absolutely, and we quite honestly have a Rolodex of MSIs. We have them all over the country. We literally have them all over the world. And we have a list of ones that know the expectations of those clients, know our expectations. My MSI sitting there will pretty much tell you I'm very difficult to work with, right?
No, he won't. Good answer. Good answer.
But at the end of the day, they know what I want. They know what my client wants, and they deliver it. Simple as that. So it's a partnership. We're all there to serve the owners, the end users, and make sure that they actually achieve whatever it is that they've identified as what they want to accomplish.
So Erin, as somebody who turned wrenches at one point, you have a broad perspective of success in this industry. I'm curious, how do you look at the MSIs when you decide which ones you want to work with? What are some of the key criteria that you use for selection in those MSIs?
Knowledge, understanding, willingness to work with both myself and the end user, and willing to modify. We all have developed a database. Let's face it, programmers are creatures of habit. I made an air handling unit. I'm going to consistently use this air handling unit over and over and over and modify for my sequence of operation. My naming scheme is this, my graphics are this. I don't want to change them. It's going to cost me too much money, too much time. Those are the integrators I don't want to deal with, because those are the integrators that don't listen to what the end users want. They can't turn on a dime. And let's face it, controls is nothing but left turns. Every single day, it's a left turn. Something else popped up. Oh, there's another piece of equipment we need to do. Oh, guess what? Have you ever heard of this protocol? So we look for integrators that are willing to be partners.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. And we'll dive more into that some more here. But let's keep moving up the ladder. So we got Erin and Stantec, the MSI of MSIs, but believe it or not, there's another level above them of MSIs. So next, I'm going to introduce Nate. And Nate's going to tell you a little bit about what Wesco's trying to accomplish. Nate?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So we're seeing an evolution whereby, kind of completing the whole story arc here. Integration in the early days started out as, making a JCI system talk to a Honeywell system. Eventually that expanded, to include things like bringing in, power meters from various manufacturers, maybe lighting, security access. We're at a point now where a lot of the enterprise clients that we serve have hybrid needs, so they're looking for their commercial facilities, all of the capital equipment, including the control systems, lighting, security access, et cetera. It's imperative that those be integrated, but now they're also asking us to start pulling in other capital asset classes like their Pro AV equipment, for example. When cameras are being refreshed every 3 or 4 years, and you've got companies investing tens of millions of dollars per year in, video walls and smart screens and things like that, they want to monitor and manage those assets and predict failure in those asset classes the exact same way they would with a chiller or an air handling unit or anything else. So we're seeing a need as, that line continues to blur between what do the IT stakeholders own versus what do the traditional facility stakeholders own. Both sides are being asked to learn more about the other at an ever increasing rate to bring in systems that frankly, 5 or 7 years ago, we weren't even really talking about in a normal integration conversation.
Yeah, and Nate, at like that level, is it real? I mean, are end users actually asking for the, I mean, are you guys at that point now where you're seeing that level of complication with the owners and their requests?
Yep, 100% real. Yep.
And you guys do a ton in the data center space. Could you speak to how like the MSI business in the data center space is different than how it is in the traditional mechanical space?
I would not say that they are remarkably different in that coming from a controls background like I do, we view a data center as just a normal critical facility, very point dense type of facility, right? But it's not that much different than what we're traditionally looking at in other types of critical sites.
Yeah, and I'm going to stay on the data center conversation for a minute because I'm sure a lot of you know that's a very hot topic in the industry today with all the work that's out there. So staying on that topic, Dan, you've been looking at some data centers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, are those integration projects or are those more TC type stuff? Or how do we, does the MSI have a spot in the typical data center projects that are coming out all over the states that we live in?
Absolutely. I think it's a hybrid of both. I mean, basically, what Nate said, I treat it as the same thing at the end of the day. But yeah, there's a very high, I mean, look, their point density, they're really a TC world in the inner stages, but I mean, there's a really high opportunity for MSIs, and I mean, we kind of look at it all as one when we're looking at those jobs currently. So,
especially as the data centers have moved over to PLCs and away from some of our traditional building automation. I mean, clearly that calls for integration. Would that be correct? I mean, is
that's
that
correct.
what you're looking at,
Absolutely,
Dan?
yeah. And we've been looking at partnering with like PLC contractors, right? And then working with them on the integration capabilities and what we can do, what we can't do.
What are some of the other systems that you're looking at tying in the data center from an integration standpoint typically?
I mean, right now, to be honest with you, it's all the PLC-based stuff.
The mechanicals?
Yeah, all the mechanicals.
Yeah.
We haven't looked at anything really further than that,
okay.
To be quite honest. So.
Anybody else want to speak to that in terms of data centers and some of the pervasiveness for integration?
Yeah, I mean, I think the PLC thing, a lot of people do like PLCs, but I've had other data center companies, and I've been meeting with many data center companies over the last year. Some people say, no, you know what, I use fixed equipment and come in there and I don't need PLCs because it's standalone, it does that, and I'm going to put a layer on top of that. The big thing that's really picking up in the data centers is the electrical side. And we've been connecting to electrical for years via Modbus. Come on, when we started our beta site at Tridium, first thing we did was Modbus. So, however, now it's power quality, right? Phase angles, and the meters are much more complex. The electrical power monitoring systems might be standalone. So we have all this different type of electrical equipment that you have to be aware of and bring in. So that's a huge one. Water's a big one, of course, and they monitor everything. It's standalone city. And the other thing they want us to be able to do is be flexible, not only to bring that in and integrate it, but to push it northbound. And listen, some are going to a cloud, but it's their own cloud. You talk to Microsoft, it goes to their cloud. You talk to Google, it goes to their cloud. So you have to be flexible to push the data several different ways. They might be using MQTT. If you're not familiar with something called MCP, that's a new protocol that a lot of the cloud providers are using to connect to the building. So it's this flexibility. And the other thing I do want to bring up about data centers is technology, it's not that hard, but the time frames and the amount of people that you have to concentrate on, you have to have deep pockets because you might have 20 of your best people working on one data center for 1 year straight, and they're working, they're working 610s, right? So it's really an intense business, and the people that stay in that business are the ones that deliver. So it's something, it's more of a business side probably that you found, and it's a little risky as well, but the rewards are very good as well because you keep those customers forever. So they're looking for partners in that data center business.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you're talking to a lot of data center providers. Are they talking about efficiency? Is that like top of mind to them, or is it more about operations? Could you speak to, from an MSI perspective, I think it's an interesting angle.
First of all of it comes together, right? If your power's lousy, then that affects your chillers, it affects everything, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, the power is one of the first things.
So power quality is important.
Power quality is an issue because what they're worried about is that going to, if a little bit of bad power quality, is that going to cause the chiller to shut down?
Right.
it's more about the daily operation. Okay, when they shut down, it could be $1 million an hour. So that's the first thing they think about. And you've got to get really good data. They can't afford to have a flood of 1,000 alarms come in. So you've got to give very pointed data to them, explain to them try to tell them what's broken. So they want quick data fast. They also want consistency, because when they build a data center, they're buying their distribution equipment 3 years ahead of time. There's people that are pre-buying their switch gear from 3 years. Same in chillers. They're doing some of the same with chillers and those sort of things. So they want to know, hey, we're going to build a data center in Ashburn, Virginia. Here's the footprint, and they want their team who's already done that to say, okay, you don't even need to submit. We're going to take our standard template, and this is what you're going to build to. So there's a lot of that standardization that they want to see, but they also need good people, right? So that what you might find if you're a master system integrator and you do a data center job, some of your best techs could be hired by the data center.
No.
So
No.
we're seeing some of that as well.
No.
So I'm being real honest with you there. And then it goes, so it's a tough
Darn
environment.
hyperscalers, they got too much money, don't they, those hyperscalers? That's not fair.
However, what I'm finding is they really know what they want, most of them, and they're really good, and they also learn. There's a lot of data center operators out there that have been to certifications for all our products, right? So they need to be standalone. They may have a service contract, but they know that their people on site have to be able to manage that data center and deal with any kind of emergency there is. So it's a mindset that you have to be aware of if you're going to get into that business. But I will tell you, there's not enough integrators, people in that business. I mean, it's a real shortage of qualified master system integrators.
Just to add on to Ed's point, what we're finding is that, because we're in Detroit, my home office is Detroit-based, I've worked with industrial systems integrators most of my career, and we're seeing them ending up in the data center space now. So the BAS MSIs are competing with the industrial MSIs for that data center work now pretty often. The industrials are the ones driving the PLCs. It's that's their bread and butter, and that's how they build reliable systems. And the BAS industry is still pushing traditional BAS stuff, and it's kind of like a little war out there. I'm finding, between the two types of companies, and then the project designs will sometimes dictate that, right? So.
Yeah, I think the technology in the building automation side is catching up a lot. The redundancy capabilities, the cybersecurity capabilities. I personally believe that the building automation side, commercial side led that. And I think the PLC industry is catching up on the cyber side. Personal opinion.
I don't disagree. Dan, do you have some comments on this?
So, I mean, where I see the opportunity on the MSI side, even if you weren't in on the initial stages of it, I mean, we're just coming off all that battery lab work where it was operation, environmental, all of those things. Now we're actually going back to those customers, and now they're entertaining efficiency. We want to integrate this. We want to look at this. So I think the data center space seems to be all about operational, at least from my experience so far.
Yeah.
But I think there is opportunity there. It might be after the fact if you can't,
Yeah, for sure. I see Erin's got some thoughts. Erin?
Well, from a design perspective, because I've already mentioned we have multiple data center clients, large data center clients that do both PLC and DDC. It was already mentioned, that you better have deep pockets. True story. Because from a design perspective, the long lead design drawings actually go out right after an MSI is brought on. And that is all your equipment that you are ordering 3 years or better before your final design is even done. After we get those out, then we start going into DDs, SDs, and CDs. And before we make it to CD, they may chuck the entire design. We actually have 2 very large data center clients right now with multiple buildings up, and we're 13 projects in with one client and 20 projects in with the other. They just decided, we don't like that design anymore, and we're going to completely redesign. So all those projects have come to an immediate halt for everybody, including the MSIs. We've got all this equipment already bought, and we're back in redesign. And some of the things that are affecting that are environmental, and some of it is progression and change and new developments in the industry. So the best MSIs that we're dealing with, again, I go back to, are the ones that can turn on a dime and are able to make those adjustments. There's also a lot of MSIs that we deal with in the data center space that can do both DDC and PLC. So looking forward, as we kind of see this continue and develop, if you're looking to get into that or currently are one, that is something you want to consider, is learning to do both. Now, controls programmers, I'm a controls girl. I'm actually still a Tridium trainer even. PLCs are boring. I don't want to program PLCs. I don't want anything to do with them. They're boring, they're dull. But there are people out there that actually like that space. So you're definitely going to want to employ both, because most of your DDC people are not going to want to deal with PLCs. They're boring.
Well, I always, if I'm in the debate between PLCs and BAS controllers, I always tell them, I'm like, why, with the PLC, it's like bringing a bazooka to a water gun fight. Like, the hell you bringing that thing on the site? What are you doing with that thing? You don't need that thing. It's a friggin' fan coil. What are you doing? Let's use some common sense too, right? That's what I've seen too with some of these designs. When they go PLC, they get all, and then you got to buy these special sensors. You got to buy this pressure thing. Everything's got to be Vicella. You're like, oh my God, like who's, and then you said and then they get the budget. They're like, oh, redesign. So it's a war out there with the PLCs and the controllers. It's interesting. So Nate, a couple more thoughts?
Yeah, just to kind of underscore everything that's been said so far, the same data silos exist in the data center as they do in any other type of commercial building as well. So, you do always have the opportunity to go back in and retroactively integrate or reintegrate various systems and then add new ones in a lot of cases. So one of the things we're seeing the emergence of is like kind of the camera as a sensor. So you've got onboard sensors on the racks and things like that. People are now saying, well, wait a minute, if I've got a remote MDF or something like that, I'm going to just put a camera in there so that I can go eyes on. So I'm going to use my analytics platform to identify an issue, do some basic root cause analysis. But before I do any of that, I can go eyes on into the space and immediately see what's happening there.
Awesome. Okay, so we killed the data center conversation for a while. So let's jump into another area. So obviously the systems integrators, master systems integrators, they tie mechanical systems together. But what else do MSIs focus on in terms of integration, and why? So does anybody want to start that conversation? Nate? All right.
Where we almost always have to start the conversation is about data, access to it, and then data quality, data organization, data tagging, data management. So before we can do anything else, we need to get the client to agree that data is a priority, having good, clean, organized data is a priority, and that having a good single source of truth database or an independent data layer, whatever we want to call it, right, that is a priority for them. That's kind of the prerequisite to making all of this work later on down the line.
Yeah, that's the bigger picture, right? Any other comments about subsystems that get integrated and how owners look at that? Yeah.
I'll take a shot. First of all, we're seeing a lot more fire alarm integration.
Yeah.
Look, we don't ring the bells and call the fire department, but people need to know what's going on with their fire system for insurance purposes, legal purposes, that sort of thing. Water quality, elevators. It used to be the elevators didn't want you touching anything, but getting good. Same is for the maintenance people. They need to know that the elevator's not working right. And if you have a fire in your building, you want an email or a text to go out to your tech so they can drive to the building to help the fire department turn things on and off. So I'm seeing more and more this just being a natural. It's just being a natural, particularly with the enterprise clients. They're saying, you are going to do this to the elevator. You are going to bring in the fire systems. We're all going to do the electrical. The lighting is still a lot of lighting, although lighting is another subject that is across the board. Some of it's just good old rock solid relay logic. Some of it's very exotic lighting systems that can have extremely complex APIs to connect to, depending on the system. So, but I do think it's becoming much more mainstream, and that's because the consultant community has kind of helped, people understand that this is the right thing to do as well.
Yeah. Erin?
Well, I think it even goes farther than that. Some of it's out of pure necessity. One of the biggest asks we're seeing of our large clients in the commercial space is people counting, thermal imaging. They want to know if they need to be cleaning that conference room every night. If it wasn't used, why are we paying janitorial to clean that? If that entire floor of a 53-story building was completely unoccupied, we don't need to pay janitorial to clean that. So that's actually even one of our biggest asks we're seeing right now is people examining their commercial space and noticing that the people just aren't there anymore. A lot of companies are return to work 3 days a week they're in the office, and the numbers are way down. And why are we running lights? Why are we creating extra conditioning if the people aren't there? Why are we paying janitorial? Why are we focusing on this or that? And so people counting is really kind of very quickly becoming a huge one. And then all the legalities that go with it, because we can't invade personal space and we can't be tracking employees and all those challenges. And that's a whole new level for MSIs to have to deal with. And how do you stay within those lines?
Agreed. Any other comments about subsystems? Or I can say that there's also, so subsystems today, a lot of them are smart. A lot of them have ways that you can integrate to them, even if there's not a known way. There's a thing out there called an API, Application Programming Interface, I believe, is what it stands for. Thank you, shaking their head, the experts. So, and essentially what that is, that's sort of like the little grill, like the decoder for how their data flows. So the API is the decoder. If you understand how to look at an API and use it, you can decode their data and easily bring it into, say, a Niagara system to be utilized, okay? Now, sometimes we integrate too much stuff. Ever? Do we ever integrate too much, Erin?
Nope.
No?
No such thing.
No such thing. No such thing. I mean, unless we screw up the application, I mean, more data for the owner, the better. So if it's sitting there and the owner needs the data and it's got an API or a driver or it's BACnet already or a Modbus or a known protocol, you grab it and you give it to them. And they like that. They're like, hey, man, thank you. Could I have some more? And anyways, that's how integration's grown all these years. And one other thing about system integration, we talk about integrating protocols and bringing them into a framework and then using the data. But did you know that the most common integrations I see MSIs doing today are not downward, they're upward, which means that integrators, another service MSIs do for the owners is they develop the software in a way that maybe meets the cybersecurity parameters of the network it has to sit on. Or maybe they create a credentialing method that is the same as the owner's credentialing for logging into the system, things like that. Those upward integrations are becoming very popular. What it does is it essentially takes the building and it allows us to tie it into the enterprise of the business at different levels for different purposes, whatever it might be, right? So don't forget, there's downward integration, there's upward integration. Anything on upward integration that you'd like to talk about?
It's just, it's so many different ways to do it now. We say, I tell people when they say, what's MQTT? I say, it's kind of like the BACnet of the cloud, right? But now you got MCP and there's so many different ways to push data to the cloud. And that's something that you have to be aware of and you have to study and keep track of. And you mentioned APIs, just on the south side a little bit. More and more MSIs have got that capability. Okay, it's a REST API. I can take some tools and I can convert it and I can get it and pull it into the system. And I think we're going to see more and more of that because equipment is going to come to the job. There's going to be more of this data center cooling units that are going to be totally different. They're going to have APIs you're going to have to deal with. But pushing it northbound, a lot of our industry has been doing that for many years, very customized. But I don't think it's going to get any easier, and I know even BACnet is now trying to push a cloud interface. They just had some meetings at this particular ASHRAE talking about how is BACnet going to deal with the cloud, and how do we organize around that. When the last thing we just did was BACnet SC, which is Secure Connect, extremely important. Now how do we get it to the cloud securely? So, and I do want to throw out one other thing. Cybersecurity is part of every part of this. If you can be a good coder, but if you don't have good cyber hygiene, okay, and how you deal with some of these APIs, and you can get yourself in trouble. So it's the essence of everything you have to do nowadays, and I think the industry gets that, and I'm sure that's a big issue that you guys worry about as well.
Yeah, we're just getting into that space now. Unfortunately, Scott's kind of helping us get into that space, and also the upward integration, we're just getting into that space, and that's just another connected service avenue revenue generator for our customer base. So, I mean, we're really pushing that moving forward.
Yeah, so Cochrane Supply, we service BAS contractors, systems integrators, and one of the things that I'm a big advocate of right now is trying to get them all to adopt some sort of cloud-based interface technology capabilities. What we do know is that everything will be in the cloud at one time, and it's coming, whether we like it or not. So the question to the integrators, the MSIs, is essentially I truly believe this. Either you're going to start selling a cloud platform that you provide to your end users, or you're going to work for somebody who did in about 2 or 3 years. So you pick your poison. Either you go sell it yourself, or I guarantee you're going to work for somebody who did, because every end user is going to buy one of these, and you don't want to be the last one to that party, because you'll be way down on the totem pole. So. Because why? Because the biggest driver is cybersecurity, as Ed mentioned. Okay, okay. Is anybody else from Tridium in here besides Ed? I don't want to upset anybody, but okay. Yeah, you're fine. Okay, so when we put a lot of our products into buildings, we're putting web servers in their buildings, and then we're asking to remote connect to their network to get to our web server. Okay, that's no good no more. That's no good. 85% of business networks in the United States got compromised last year, including mine, Cochrane Supplies, right? We were one of, everybody gets compromised. Everything on that network was exposed to the cyber hacker community. We may have been hosting a building or two. I don't know. But we sure as hell aren't anymore on-prem in our network. Why? Because that is the worst thing you can do with cybersecurity. So as an industry, we've embedded web servers in all these people's buildings, and we have remote access through VPNs and other methods, and that all has to change. The proper way in the future will be to give them remote access to a cloud, a digital twin, or a secured copy of the data that's in the building. And we stop giving them access to the building networks, because that's just bad. Okay, well, that means that everybody's got to put their remote interfaces up on a cloud, right, to do it cyber securely in the future. And that's where my that's where my statement comes back. Either you're going to go sell that, fix the problem, or you're going to be working for somebody who did. Because all the IT departments right now who see your BAS devices on their network are double thinking it right now if you have remote access to it. Now, I'm not against air gapping. I always tell people, do you really need remote access? Because air gap takes away a huge risk in cybersecurity. But the types of buildings we do, everybody seems to need remote access, so it just doesn't work. So, okay, so any comments on that panel? Dan?
I mean, so far, all of our customer base, I would say 80 to 90% of them, the existing customer base is actually entertaining this. I mean, they didn't know about it. I mean, obviously they know about cloud-based systems, but they didn't know we could put the BAS system on the cloud. They want it off their network. And I would say weekly, I mean, I'm not sure how many customers that we're monitoring on a regular basis right now, but we're changing this VPN. Now your multi-factor authentication on this one and this and that, and only this person in your office can get access. This is going to change all of that. It's just being able to sell that to that customer base. Where I struggle with it is in the planned spec market. Like right now, there isn't any guideline for that. It's like, okay, you sold me a BMS system. Oh, by the way, you owe me X amount of dollars a year to, host it. So that's something that we're working on.
It's Erin's job. She's got to design that.
Help with that.
Yeah.
No, along those lines, there was actually an article that I came across yesterday. It was just recently published. For the last 6 years, there has been an effort to set up cybersecurity guidelines with the Homeland Security, DOD or DOW, whatever they're called this week, and they finally got it passed. That's a huge win for our industry, absolutely huge win, because what that means is every client out there that is subject to U.S. governance, banking, any financial, any government institution, they have now developed those cybersecurity guidelines. And that now means that eventually, it took them 6 years to get there, so I'm not going to be hopeful it's going to happen next year, but eventually we're going to start seeing those guidelines where the governance is actually going to start letting those institutions go cloud-based as well. So that is absolutely a huge win for our industry. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of end user domains that I've been in the meetings with contractors when the end user said, you will never, ever get a cloud connected to this network. And I've seen them all change. Not all, but most have changed their IT department. These are IT departments. Their philosophies have changed. So it's definitely being well accepted now, and something that I think it brings a lot of benefit to the projects as well. Because don't forget what's coming next, folks. AI. So if you think you could, we were talking about AI in the building versus up on the cloud. I mean, AI in the building will be limited to, capacity. I mean, there's just going to be a limited amount. But when we talk about big data and what we can do with it with AI in the future, that's going to be organized data from the building going up to a cloud, 100%. That's why those hyperscalers are building those data centers, because that's what it takes to run the type of AI that will be used to harness the power of all this data. So it's almost like an inevitable conclusion with the AI coming too, that this data has to get rolled up to the cloud. So another comment on that, Nate?
Yeah, I would just add that I concur with the group that 3 years ago, no one wanted anything cloud hosted. Today, even though the majority are still on-prem installations, almost every single enterprise client has asked for a migration path to the cloud for exactly the reasons that you've outlined, Scott.
Yeah. So cybersecurity, let's come back to that a little, because what we're seeing too is the MSI is not just the data component for the end user, but they're almost like the cybersecurity element that the end user uses to check to make sure that, because if you think about BAS, there's really not an IT group that hyper analyzes the cybersecurity requirements for it or the architectures and things. Who do they rely on? The contractors. So oftentimes the MSI is the consultant on the cybersecurity requirements for the subsystems, for how people access it, the cloud. Could you guys speak to kind of your role in cybersecurity as an MSI? I guess you want to start, Ed?
Yeah, I'll start. First of all, it's the largest R&D item we have is cybersecurity, right? So that's most of our engineering time, after we do all the really good stuff and get all the nice stuff encoded, then cybersecurity comes in, and that's a huge amount in our budget because it's a huge risk. And I think it's a good thing, okay?
It's your software. It better not be exposed, Ed,
Well, exactly.
Kidding.
But the point is, we have to build the tools to make it easier for the MSI to use, right? So we're also trying to build tools in, because not everybody can be a cyber expert, right? There's some great ones out there. So it has to be inherent in every product that's out there today. Yeah. It's not yet by far, but it is so important. And the good news is our industry, and like Greg on your team, who's doing some great trainings, and and Fred Gordy and others out there in the industry, and there's many others, don't get me wrong, that are really pushing for cyber, and it's becoming a practice, and I'm sure Stantec's got that practice as well. So I think the good news is it's a huge requirement. We have end users that are coming to us and say, this is our infrastructure. We want to make sure that you meet it, and frankly, you'd be surprised how many different things you have to support, because different people have different ways how they do cybersecurity. So you have to build those into your product and say, okay, this one's for this car manufacturer, and we have to support this little piece and this little object in Niagara to do that.
And from a contractor's perspective, you really need that person on your staff that is versed in all of that. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit we don't have anybody on our staff, right, that we're relying on outside sources, but we can see that coming quickly. We're going to need somebody.
They look at you, Dan, for the information.
Well, 100%.
Yeah.
But we're going outside of our business to help those
because you're responsible and you want to do the right thing.
Well, yeah, I mean,
but you're being forced to be the expert. They did not bring one to the table for you.
Right.
And that's really the reality of the MSI role, is you do have to be very strong in cybersecurity, because you are oftentimes the main consultant for the end user in regards to that. So, Erin, you're designing cybersecurity. How's that going?
It's actually a challenge from a design perspective, because not only do we have to be up to date on regulations and code, we also have to be up to date on products. And so we rely very heavily, a lot of times, on our MSI partners to help us kind of weave our way through that. Several of us on the team are IT certified. We have cybersecurity certification. We have within Stantec, we have an entire group that's their sole focus is cybersecurity. So we can rely on them. But what they don't know is the products. So we have to kind of marry with them. And again, our MSI partners are a huge help too because they know their products. So we're able to work with them to also be able to advise our clients and make the right decision and designs.
Yep. Anything to add, Nate?
Yeah, I agree. It's from the client perspective, it's very much I would say a benchmarking exercise right now. So they want to know all about the best practices. They want to know what leading financial services institutions, for example, are doing, or healthcare institutions, those types of things. And to your point, this is where, the fact that we work in kind of an 85 or 90% world, there's always an element of customization. We have to work with their cybersecurity and security architecture review teams to make sure that we're building a solution for them that meets all of their requirements and also adheres to best practices and also leverages a lot of the latest technology that is coming out.
100%. Okay, cool. So let's change a little bit again the conversation. So one of the other interesting things I've learned over the last, I'll say, in the last couple of years is large end users with large building portfolios will sometimes act as their own master systems integrators, believe it or not. A lot of times it starts with data standards for the owner, but oftentimes it leads into, essentially the owner taking ownership of that part of the business, both from an IT cybersecurity standpoint, landing on their network, collaborating with IT, writing standards for contractors to follow and specifications for engineers, and then actually going through with the same tools the contractors use to commission their work, tie it back into central facilities. And we're seeing this more and more with larger, more complicated end users. Could any of you speak to some of that, like that progression and what you guys are seeing with your customers?
Yeah, I would say it's a huge gap right now, also a huge opportunity. So if someone, within an enterprise or a larger organization takes the initiative to learn those tools and understand some basic project management principles, that's a fast track to promotion, additional responsibility, et cetera, because of those enterprises relying so heavily right now on third-party contractors and consultants. So the line is always a little bit blurred, and as closely as you try to partner with them, they always want to have someone in-house that's kind of a trusted program manager to act as their representative.
Yeah, so we might have one of those in our midst today, and if he doesn't mind, can I borrow your mic?
I'll take one. I'll take it to him.
You got it? Okay, so Frank, this is Frank. He's with Stanford. Stanford is, this is Palo Alto, Stanford. Frank's group does that. And Frank, could you talk a little bit about the services you guys provide and how you work with the contractors?
Sure, and I knew Scott was going to pick on me for this session. He gave me the heads up beforehand. So yeah, Stanford acts as its own MSI. We act as a consultant. Our primary driver is acting as a consultant to the university for anything related to building automation. That's everything from operation and maintenance all the way up to new construction standards, helping define how projects are managed. We partner with our capital projects teams to help manage projects. We essentially are the owner at the table when it comes to all things related to BAS.
Yes, and when contractors put systems in, Frank's team goes through. They don't commission it. They commission it for their own purpose, and then you guys do the central interface work of tying it back together.
Correct. We do all the integration. So basically everything from the JACE upwards, my team handles that piece, which is building out graphics, alarms, trending. If it's integration to a third-party system, we also bring that in-house as well.
And Frank, will your IT department let us bring a cloud in yet?
Hell no. No way.
Stanford IT. Frank and I did the Stanford IT thing for about a year, and we learned a lot, didn't we?
We fought the good fight, but it just didn't work out.
They're really smart at Stanford with IT, and but they decided to keep us in their network. So, but thanks, Frank. So just one more perspective, folks. So it's this craft, this concept is really, it's going in a lot of different directions with a lot of different organizations, and so it's not like this clear-cut thing, and so I think this, looking at it from the different perspectives, hopefully will give you guys some insight into how to look at it for yourselves. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'd like to open it up for audience questions. We got a question in the back there?
So you talked a lot about what master system integrators are. What's the playbook to get there for being a regular integrator? Master system.
Great question. So some ideas on how to get to becoming a master systems integrator. Anybody want to start?
I mean, trial by fire. I mean, honestly, we've been fortunate to be able to bring some staff members on that played in that market pretty heavily before, but I mean, you just got to take the risk and not be scared to integrate. There's enough information out there. There's enough resources to just start picking that stuff up.
I think it's born out of necessity. You identify a niche, an area, and you grow into it. Obviously, finding talent, which is obviously a huge struggle right now for all of us. Those skills are kind of quickly disappearing. But investing in the people, investing in the knowledge, the OT-IT convergence, that's a huge piece for where we're heading in this industry.
Go ahead. I mean, just pile on to what Erin said, that just made me think. I mean, we attacked like the Modbus market, right? Like, so we have a lot of, where we're located, I mean, we have a lot of automotive business. There's a lot of PLC process integration that goes on in our marketplace. So we focused on that first and then just kind of spread out. I mean, in our world, Modbus, RTU, Modbus TCP, once you have that figured out, you can integrate any of that equipment, so.
I would add to that, the market is already there, so it is the cross-training and development of people or hiring for people with those specific skill sets. So, improving, hiring a bench with IT and information services experience, cybersecurity experience, and then finding some of those application engineers that want to take the initiative to learn the tool sets like we talked about earlier. And they'll expand into that with really no problem and probably a lot faster than you would think they would.
I see Robert. Robert, what did you guys do? How did you guys get there?
One more comment. Support your people that want to do it. Like I said, if you have somebody that wants to learn, maybe you have somebody that just knows BACnet, just knows this controller, say, look, why don't you go take a class in Modbus, and maybe you support them to do that. There's so much stuff online to learn. So encourage your team to start slow. Start with a Modbus integration for a generator or for a meter or something of that sort, and build your lab. I got to tell you, I think most master system integrators, you walk into their office, they've got labs that they've connected to stuff, and they're sitting there always practicing, always trying to learn. So encourage your employees to do that. It's an investment you have to make, but you really should be making that investment.
Lab.
Don't think you have to jump in with both feet.
That's my house.
Yeah, right. So, for us, like, 100% agree with you, but knowing what that data is, right? Like, anybody can integrate anything or learn to, but really knowing what that data means and what it does, that's huge for us, and being able to translate that to the customer. So,
yeah, great. Okay, more questions. I saw one hand back there. No, to quit. Go ahead.
Hey, you mentioned that a lot of your clients have deep pockets, and I'm curious, do you ever run into an issue where you are brought to the table and you're asked to run something that you don't actually have the ability to with the budget that you're given? How do you approach that?
Good question about budget. When they ask for a bunch of stuff and they don't have the money to pay you to do it, how do you handle that was the question.
From a design perspective, we tell them the truth. I mean, we know based on the ask right up front that I don't think your money's going to cover what you're asking for, but here is what your money will cover. And at that point, the choice is theirs.
When you're talking about technology-enabled solutions and services, a lot of people jump to the tech because it usually shows really well and it's fun to talk about, but it's a business conversation first as well. You have to understand their outcomes and their priorities and what budget they have available and what timeline they want to work on before you can start really solutioning that.
And one other thing, think about operational cost. Most of the time, integration saves a lot of it saves energy costs and those sort of things. But operational cost, I could say over and over, is usually a much bigger piece. So look at it. How much are they going to save if they do integrate all their meters and they're not running around campus having to read meters and those sort of things? So look at the value there. You got to do some homework and say, you may not have the budget in the new construction, but maybe your IT department will be willing to kick in, okay, because maybe it's going to be more cyber secure, or like I said, maybe you're going to save some operational truck rolls and those types of things.
I think that falls under day 2 cost, though. So there's that second conversation of, okay, you want all this tech, but you do have a day 2 cost that you have to consider as well, both positive and negative.
Okay, so that's going to wrap it up. We're out of time. So I'd like to thank my panelists. You guys are awesome. That was great. Thank you for my step-in panelists. Thank you. And thank everybody. We'll be up here for a few minutes. If anybody wants to continue the dialogue, feel free to come up. Thank you, everybody.